mighty on your throne. You reign, you ancient Zion's king. Cry out, Kadosh, you are mighty on your throne.
How do I pray without ceasing? It means prayer is not request based, it's intimacy based. If you pray for request, when your request is over, your prayer will stop. But if the Bible is telling you to pray without ceasing, it means prayer has a depth beyond the things you are asking for. That means prayer begins when you actually stop asking. When you stop asking for things, then you start journeying with God. And so the first benefit of prayer is the fact that God invites us into fellowship with him. And if you have read the scriptures for yourself, you would understand one of the greatest advantages in the spirit is the opportunity or the privilege of standing in God's presence or interacting with God. When Gabriel came to speak with Zacharias, he didn't introduce himself as an archangel, because in heaven, your title is not as important as your intimacy. When he introduced himself to God, he said, I am Gabriel that standeth in the presence. It goes to mean that in the realm where things really matter, your proximity with God is your greatest advantage. And so when God is inviting us to prayer, it's a blessing that we may not understand if we are dealing with God with our brain. You know, if you were to meet the president today, it will affect everything about you. Your dressing, your excitement level, everything will change. Because you know when you come to the president, you are dealing with the one who has the handle of changing things in the nation. And so your relationship with him is superior to a car. Your relationship with him is superior to a house. In fact, if you get close to him enough, there are positions you can attain that will make a car and a house the byproduct. In fact, you become so relevant that you can give out cars. Now, when you are talking about a spirit that is eternal, when he invites you to him, what then does that give to you? Now, people don't understand this. This is why they struggle with prayer. If we understand that prayer is not just another channel of shopping from the realm of God, but an invitation into intimacy, we'll begin to see the blessedness of prayer. And the first thing prayer affords us is the opportunity to know God and to walk with him. That knowledge of God and that right standing with God that is bestowed upon you gives you so many things that I will not have the opportunity to mention now. But one of it is authority. Because only the man who stands in God's presence has the right to wield God's authority. In our country today, there is what we call the cabal system. And you know, the cabals don't need to tell you who they are. But because they are with the president, they can affect the country in any direction they want. That kind of authority, it is not necessarily named, but it is the ability to make things happen. And so when you find people walking on the earth who make things happen, find out where they are standing. They have a relationship with the spirit. And so prayer is the first foundation of relationship with God. And that foundational relationship confers upon you authority. When authority begins to find expression in your life, your needs vanish. Because you don't need to ask for them anymore. You now make them happen. When a man is asking God for things, it's because he has not entered authority. When a man enters authority, he stops asking God for things. He begins to make things happen. Because we're not called to ask for things. We were actually called to manifest God. But for you to manifest God, you have to stay close enough for God to rub off on you. You know, when Jesus sent us into the world, he didn't say go into the world and ask God to do things. No. He said go to the world and change it. But for you to go into the world, you have to be with him first. And so when we talk about intimacy, we are actually talking about the secrets of dominion. And this is what the patriarchs know. And so when the patriarchs are talking, they don't talk the things that are common. When a David is talking to you, for example, he won't talk to you about the things you can possess. He will talk to you about where you are standing. And so in Psalm 65 from verse 4, here's what the Bible said. It said, blessed is the man whom God causes to approach him. Because the man who approaches God begins to wield every authority that God has in his possession. He said, blessed is the man whom God causes, whom God chooses, and whom God causes to approach him, whose delight is in tarrying in the courts of God. Because that man becomes an agent of authority. The things others are pursuing after, they are the things he just commands and they happen. If you go to Psalm 80 verse 18 again, he now began to make a statement. He said, quicken us, O Lord, that we may call upon you. So in case we are not hearing your beckoning, why don't you energize us to call upon you? Because our greatest ambition is to stand with you. Our greatest ambition is to walk with you, because we know when we possess you, every other thing becomes a byproduct. And so he identified first that it's a blessing to approach God. And then he also went further to say, somewhere, somehow, we don't have the tendencies of choosing you. There are so many other things that distract us. We want to watch the World Cup finals, and we prepare for it for 1 week. We are excited about it. But when it has to do with the courts of heaven, somewhere, somehow, even though we know that the oracles of God dwell there, our appetites and our proclivities and tendencies are not designed to come there. So since we are not wise enough to desire you, quicken us, O Lord, that we may call upon your name. The reason is simple. When we come to where you are, everything will meet us there. But when we chase things, we become frustrated and we become stranded, because we will never get them. And so the place where all things converge is in the presence of God. And so the psalmist knows walking with God becomes the greatest asset in life. And what God gave to us as a free ticket is the right to come there. And so when we are talking about prayer, we are not talking about asking God and receiving something from God. We are actually talking about the liberty to walk with God. Whoever calls upon him, he says he will answer. If you can call, God will be there for you. But the reason many are not calling is because they've not seen the blessedness of the presence of God. When the psalmist was speaking, he said, a day in the courts of God is better than 1,000 years elsewhere. What does he know? What did he encounter, and what has happened to him? That on the strength of time and chronology, he will refer to one day in God's presence as greater than 1,000 years elsewhere. Is it possible that your existence without a relationship with God is already a waste? Because how many people will live for 1,000 years? If somebody who knows God's presence is saying a day in God's presence is greater than 1,000 years, and you have lived for 80 years, you say you are old. And somebody else who has entered reality is telling you that there is a realm where a moment is superior to a lifetime. That realm is in God's presence. And in prayer, you have the ticket of living in that realm. And so when Paul came, he said, don't pray for 3 hours. Don't pray in the morning. Don't pray in the evening. He said, pray without ceasing. Dwell there. That means if you dwell there, 10 days of your life will be equivalent to what? 10,000 years. 1 year of your life will be equivalent to 360,000 years. So if you are now alive for 30 years, how old are you in real sense? So when they ask you for your date of birth, you will look at them and smile. You will say, you won't believe when I tell you. Do you see why certain men become ancient? When they talk, you know they are digging something from a realm that is deeper than time. Because according to the divine equation, a day in God's presence is greater than 1,000 years. And you have lived in God's presence for 30 years. So how old are you? So when men now weigh you and they are saying, how can this boy be 22 years and he's making impact? You tell them, I am not 22. You are judging from the wrong plane. Where I go to, 1 day is 1,000 years. That is why I can be 19 and I'll be affecting the globe. Because I go to places where spirits that are older than time dwell. They were there when time was created. They were the ones who fabricated the time. It's called the benefit of prayer. So when you come to sing, the words you articulate together, people hear them and they say, where did you get it from? I came from where words were created. I'm not talking what I read in a book. I came from, there are scrolls somewhere where time doesn't exist. And if you want to become old, come with me. You will age in the natural realm, but in the spirit you become ancient. And so the greatest benefit of prayer is intimacy. When you become intimate with God, you go to where reality begins from. And so your life becomes a wonder to your generation. The reason many are not praying is because they are interacting with other things. Thank God for the books you read about Albert Einstein. They are beautiful. That is called fellowship with Albert Einstein. Thank God for the books you read from the wise men of the world. They are beneficial. But there are certain things that are deeper than men can articulate. When you come to where men interact with God, you see things that sometimes only you can know them. Because there is a specificity about ordination. And so there is something God will whisper. 5 of us will hear, but we'll hear different things. And so when we come out, one may become a billionaire. Because what he heard empowered him to make wealth. Another will hear something and he'll become a miracle worker. All of us thought we heard the same thing. But because we are coming to where knowledge dwells, when he says one thing, it can mean 1,000 things. And so the true advantage of the believer is his ability through prayer to walk with God. And so when we start engaging the altar of prayer, our goal is not the lingo. Our goal is not the time. Our goal is the depth. Where have I journeyed to in God? Paul said, I know a man many years ago, whether he was in the flesh or in the spirit, I can't tell. He said, but that man was carried to the third heaven. And when Paul came back, he said he went even to Hades, and the things he heard were unlawful to be uttered among men. So how can a man know something that men are not permitted to know? Who is he? It is called the mysteries of intimacy. And when you enter that depth with God, you become a joy of many generations. The things you say, generations after you, we utter them. They will never be satisfied. The reason is because you have walked with a spirit that is ancient. And so the first benefit of prayer is the fact that prayer opens the doorway to intimacy. A man who doesn't know prayer will not have intimacy with God. And if he doesn't have intimacy with God, the true advantages that are made for his destiny, he will never realize them. He will think he's making progress until they show him his reality from Zion. Somebody may be making 1 million a month, 10 million a month, 20 million a month, and he said, I am doing well. And then they look at you from Zion, they say, you've never come here. How come? How come we've never seen you? If we don't see you and you don't come here, how can you now attach purpose to the money you have? The money you have will now become the basis of your condemnation. Because when you go to where they whisper to the souls of men, they will tell you it is not about the money, it's about the purpose of that money. And you can never have an understanding of that purpose with your brain. It will be shown to you. And so the first true benefit of prayer is that in prayer, men are invited to walk with God. This is why the patriarchs of old exalted prayer, because they knew that outside of God they were nothing. And because they now know God forever and ever, their names will never be forgotten. Do you think you call your child David because you love the name David? No, you don't love David. That name has no meaning to you. It is because of who bore it and who he became in God. And so when you call your son David, you are actually reminiscing on the immortality of a man who has walked with the Spirit. So men become eternally relevant because they walk with the Spirit. This is a man who wandered around with women, but suddenly he saw a spirit and he started walking with that spirit. And forever and ever, generations to come will be honored to name themselves after his order, because he has seen something that is eternal. Abraham was in the hall of the Chaldees until he encountered that spirit. And when he met that spirit, forever and ever, you and I became the children of Abraham. The question is, when you leave, what will you be remembered for?